The conference room air conditioning hummed like a dental drill, that particular frequency that makes your molars ache, and Sarah Chen counted her breaths the way she always did when the wall started closing in 4 and hold 6 out, while Marcus Thorne's voice filled the space like carbon monoxide, odorless but suffocating. Efficiency isn't just a metric. He was saying, his Mont Blanc pen clicking against the glass table with each word. It's a moral imperative. And frankly, Sarah, your department's performance has been, let's call it nostalgic. The word hung there between them, and Sarah felt the eyes of 14 department heads turned toward her. Some sympathetic, most just grateful. It wasn't them in the crosshairs this Tuesday morning. She'd been with Apex Solutions for 11 years, had built their operations analytics from scratch, had saved them millions in redundancies. Nobody else even saw, but none of that mattered now that Marcus Thorne had arrived 6 weeks ago with his Stanford MBA and his efficiency gospel and his ability to make competence look like complacency. I'm happy to walk through our Q3 metrics, Sarah said, keeping her voice level professional the way her mother had taught her to speak when men were trying to make you small. We're actually ahead of projection by projections based on outdated models. Marcus interrupted, and there was something almost gleeful in the way he opened his leather portfolio, revealing a stack of papers she recognized immediately as her own reports, but covered in red ink like crime scene photos. I've been reviewing your historical data, and I have to say I'm concerned about what appears to be a pattern of, how should I put this, generous interpretations of resource allocation. The room temperature seemed to drop another degree, and Sarah understood with crystalline clarity what was happening. This wasn't about efficiency. This was about making an example, about Marcus establishing his new order by destroying something established, something that had worked just fine before he arrived with his talk of disruption and transformation. She'd seen it before, this particular species of corporate predator, but she'd never been the gazelle. Could you be more specific, she asked, though she could already see where this was heading. By the way Marcus's assistant Bradley was avoiding eye contact, by the way even her ally in IT James was studying his phone like it contained the meaning of life. Marcus stood all 6'3" of him and walked to the whiteboard with the deliberate stride of a prosecutor approaching the jury. Let's talk about your department's coffee budget, he said, and several people actually laughed, thinking it was a joke until they saw his expression. $800 last quarter. For coffee. While our shareholders are expecting 15% growth. That's for 4 departments, actually, Sarah said, and it includes the client meeting refreshments that won't be necessary going forward. Marcus drew a large X through a number on the board. Effective immediately, all departmental food and beverage budgets are suspended pending a comprehensive audit. But that's just the beginning. He turned back to the room, his smile as thin as paper. Sarah, I'm placing your department under performance review. You have 30 days to demonstrate why operations analytics shouldn't be absorbed into general accounting. I'll need daily reports on your team's productivity, individual performance metrics for each analyst, and a justification for every hour billed to overhead. Sarah felt her phone vibrate in her pocket, probably Lisa from her team watching the live stream from her desk, seeing her boss get filleted in real time. The performance review was a death sentence, and everyone knew it. 30 days of documentation that would be twisted, weaponized, used to justify whatever Marcus had already decided. She could fight it, could go to HR, could try to reach the CEO who'd hired her all those years ago, but Marcus was smart. He'd wrapped his attack in the language of efficiency, of fiscal responsibility, of all the things that made board members nod approvingly while people's livelihoods were destroyed. I understand, Sarah said, because what else was there to say? You couldn't fight efficiency. It was like fighting gravity. Marcus's smile widened slightly, the satisfaction of a predator who'd successfully isolated prey. Excellent. Oh, and Sarah, I'll need you to relocate your team to Building C while we optimize the space allocation in this building. Facilities will help you move by end of day. Building C, the annex. The place they put departments before they died, with its flickering lights and broken elevators and bathrooms that smelled perpetually of industrial disinfectant. Sarah stood gathering her laptop and notebook with steady hands, refusing to let them see her shake. As she reached the door, Marcus called out one more time. Oh, and Sarah, the coffee maker in Building C has been decommissioned. Budget constraints, you understand. The laughter that followed her out was quiet but unmistakable. The sound of people grateful for their own survival, and Sarah walked down the hallway counting her breaths, 4 and hold 6 out, While behind her, she heard Marcus already moving on to his next target, something about marketing's travel expenses. Her team was waiting when she got back to their soon-to-be former office space. 8 analysts who'd followed her through 3 restructures and 2 recessions, and she could see in their faces they already knew. Lisa, her senior analyst, had tears in her eyes but was trying to hide them behind her thick-rimmed glasses. Dev, her data specialist, was already boxing up his collection of coding books. Tommy, the youngest at 24, looked like someone had just told him Santa wasn't real. Building C, Lisa asked, and Sarah nodded. It's not permanent, Sarah said, though they all knew it probably was. We have 30 days to prove our value. We've done it before. Not with someone actively trying to destroy us, Dev said quietly. I've been looking at the patterns. Every department Marcus has put under review in his previous companies has been eliminated within 90 days. Every single one. Sarah felt something shift in her chest, a small cold thing that might have been despair, but felt more like determination. Then we'll be the first exception, she said. Start packing. We need to be out by 5. The move to Building C was deliberately humiliating. Marcus had sent an email to the entire company about space optimization, making it sound like Sarah's team had volunteered to relocate. The facilities crew, led by a man named Robert, whom Sarah had known for years, looked embarrassed as they loaded boxes onto carts. This ain't right, Robert muttered as he helped her carry a whiteboard down 3 flights of stairs because the freight elevator was under maintenance indefinitely. You know that, right? What he's doing ain't right. Sarah appreciated the solidarity. But what could Robert do? What could any of them do? Marcus had wrapped everything in corporate speak in efficiency metrics and optimization protocols. He wasn't breaking any rules. He was just bending them until people broke instead. Building C was worse than she remembered. The fluorescent lights buzzed and flickered like dying insects. The air conditioning was broken, leaving the space either arctic or sweltering, with no middle ground. Their new office was actually a converted conference room with no windows, no proper ventilation, and walls so thin they could hear the boiler room next door clanking and hissing like a dying dragon. Home sweet home, Tommy said, trying for levity, but his voice cracked. They spent the rest of the day setting up computers on folding tables, trying to make the space functional. Sarah noticed things she hadn't expected: how Dev had brought his own power strips because he'd already scouted the space and knew there weren't enough outlets, how Lisa had packed extra supplies from their old office just in case, how even Tommy had thought to grab the good staplers before facilities could claim them. Her team was fighting in small ways, and that gave her something to hold on to as she sat in her car that night in the Apex parking lot, watching the lights in Building A, where Marcus was probably still working, still plotting, still finding new efficiencies to extract from the company like marrow from bones. Her phone rang. It was her sister Amy calling from Seattle. "How was your day?" Amy asked, and Sarah almost laughed at the normalcy of the question. "I'm being pushed out," Sarah said, surprising herself with the bluntness. "The new COO, he's going to destroy my department and probably me with it." There was a pause. Amy was a labor lawyer, had seen plenty of workplace battles, but this was her sister. "Document everything," Amy said finally. "Every email, every interaction, every policy change. Save it all to a personal drive. You might not be able to stop him, but you can protect yourself for what comes after." After Sarah hung up, she sat in the darkness a moment longer, watching a security guard make his rounds. Then she drove home to her empty apartment, heated up leftover pasta, and opened her laptop. She began forwarding emails to her personal account, downloading files, creating a record of 11 years of work that was about to be erased. She didn't know yet that she was building something else, something that would matter more than any performance review. She was building a case. The next morning came too soon and not soon enough. Sarah arrived at Building C at 6:47 a.m., partly to avoid the morning rush of sympathetic looks from other departments, partly because the air conditioning actually worked for about an hour in the early morning before dying its daily death. She found Robert already there, standing outside the door to their office with the industrial fan. "Figured you might need this," he said, wheeling it in without waiting for permission. "Found it in storage. Still works pretty good." "Robert, you don't have to." "Yeah, I do." He plugged in the fan, and it roared to life, pushing the stale air around in what was at least an approximation of circulation. "Been here 18 years, Sarah. I seen a lot of people come and go. But what's happening to you, that ain't normal. That's targeted." He left before she could respond, but something in his tone stuck with her. Targeted. Not just efficiency, not just corporate downsizing, but something personal. She opened her laptop and began what would become her morning ritual for the next 3 weeks, documenting everything. 7:14 a.m. arrived at Building C. Temperature 82 degrees, building standard is 72. Submitted facilities request 447. 7:32 a.m. team arrival. Lisa, 7:32, Dev 7:38, Tommy 7:41. All on time despite Building C's distance from main parking. 7:45 a.m. morning huddle. Reviewing Marcus's daily reporting requirements. The reports Marcus demanded were deliberately oppressive. Each team member had to account for their time in 15-minute increments. Every analysis had to be justified with a cost-benefit calculation. Every bathroom break, every coffee run, every moment of human interaction that couldn't be quantified as productive had to be explained. It was designed to exhaust them, to make them make mistakes, to create a paper trail of inefficiency that Marcus could point to when he finally pulled the trigger. But Sarah had been an operations analyst for over a decade. She knew how to make data tell stories, and she began to notice patterns in Marcus's own efficiency crusade. It started small. A discrepancy in the Building C maintenance budget that didn't match the actual work being done. She'd requested air conditioning repair 3 times and been told each time that the budget was exhausted. But when she pulled the facilities reports, thank you, Robert, for accidentally leaving his login active on her computer, she saw that $47,000 had been allocated for Building C improvements just this quarter. Where had it gone? Dev, she called out on day 3 of their exile. Can you run a cross-reference on facilities spending for the last 6 months? Dev looked up from his screen where he'd been documenting his 15-minute increments with the dedication of a monk illuminating manuscripts. Any particular reason? Call it curiosity. While Dev worked his data magic, Sarah tackled the daily report for Marcus, each word chosen, carefully, professionally, giving him nothing to use against them while saying nothing of substance. It was exhausting, this corporate kabuki, but she'd gotten good at it over the years. Lisa knocked on the door frame of what passed for Sarah's office, really just a corner of the conference room with a partial divider. You need to see this, she said, holding her laptop. On the screen was an email chain Lisa had been CC'd on. By accident, Marcus's assistant, Bradley, had meant to forward it to a different L, Chin in accounting. The subject line was Phase 2 Implementation, and the content made Sarah's blood run cold. Upon successful consolidation of operations analytics into general accounting, Marcus had written, we can proceed with the vendor transition. Thorn Elite Consulting is prepared to assume all analytical functions at 60% of current overhead costs. Thorn Elite Consulting. Sarah stared at the name. Is that his wife's company? Lisa confirmed. I looked it up. Incorporated 3 months ago, right before he started here. The pieces clicked into place with the precision of a trap snapping shut. This wasn't about efficiency. It was about funneling Apex's operations to a company Marcus had a personal stake in. He wasn't optimizing, he was stealing. Forward that to me, Sarah said quietly. Then delete it from your inbox. If Bradley realizes his mistake. Already done, Lisa said. What are you going to do? Sarah thought about her sister's advice. Document everything. I'm going to keep writing my reports, she said. And we're going to keep doing our jobs. But Lisa, start backing up everything. Not just our work, everything. The days blurred together in Building C's fluorescent purgatory. Tommy developed a persistent cough from the mold they discovered in the ceiling tiles. Dev started getting migraines from the flickering lights. Lisa's carpal tunnel flared up from working on the terrible folding tables. But they kept working, kept documenting, kept producing the analyses that Apex needed, even if Marcus pretended they didn't. And Sarah kept digging. The facility's budget discrepancy was just the beginning. She found similar patterns in 3 other departments Marcus had optimized. Money allocated but never spent, or spent on vendors that existed only on paper. She cross-referenced the vendor payments with state business registrations and found shell companies registered to addresses that turned out to be mailbox stores or vacant lots. This is fraud, Dev said when she showed him the spreadsheet she'd been building at home on her own time, on her own computer. This is actual prosecutable fraud. Maybe, Sarah said, but I need more. He's too smart to leave obvious trails. These could all be explained as accounting errors, miscommunications, inefficiencies in the system he's trying to fix. It was Robert who gave her the next piece of the puzzle, though he didn't know it at the time. He was fixing their door handle for the third time it kept falling off another Building C special when he mentioned offhand that Marcus had just approved a $90,000 renovation for the executive conference room. 90,000, Sarah couldn't help but react. But he just cut the coffee budget for being wasteful. Robert shrugged. New furniture, new AV system, some kind of special glass for the windows. All from some vendor I never heard of. Usually we use Sheffield for that stuff, but he trailed off, tightening a screw with more force than necessary. Sarah made a note. Another vendor to research, another thread to pull. 2 weeks into their 30-day review period, Marcus summoned her to Building A for a progress meeting. She walked the familiar hallways like a ghost returning to haunt her former life, nodding at colleagues who looked at her with that mixture of pity and relief that she was beginning to recognize as survivor's guilt. Marcus's office was on the top floor, of course, with views of the mountains and furniture that probably cost more than Tommy's annual salary. He made her wait 17 minutes past their scheduled time, she counted, before his assistant finally showed her in. "Sarah," Marcus said with false warmth, not getting up from behind his desk. "How's the team settling into their new space?" "We're adapting," Sarah said neutrally, taking the seat across from him without being invited. The chair was deliberately low, forcing her to look up at him. Such a small, petty power play, but effective. "Good, good. Adaptation is key to survival in the modern business ecosystem." He opened her daily reports on his tablet, making a show of scrolling through them. "I have to say these reports are very thorough. You asked for comprehensive documentation." "I did." He set down the tablet and leaned back, fingers steepled. "But I'm not seeing the kind of innovative thinking I expect from a department fighting for its existence. Where are the cost-cutting proposals, the efficiency improvements, the bold restructuring that shows you understand the gravity of your situation?" Sarah had prepared for this. "I've identified several areas where we could optimize our processes. Would you like me to walk through them?" "Please." She pulled out her own tablet, showing him a presentation she'd worked on until 2 a.m. the night before. It was all smoke and mirrors, using his own buzzwords and empty metrics to say nothing while sounding like something. She'd learned his language, the corporate Esperanto of disruption and synergy and paradigm shifts. She watched his eyes glaze over slightly as she talked about leveraging cross-functional capabilities and implementing agile methodologies. "Interesting," he said when she finished, though she could tell he'd stopped listening halfway through. "But I'm not convinced this goes far enough. I want to see real change, Sarah. Real commitment to the new direction we're taking this company. What would that look like to you?" she asked, keeping her voice steady. He smiled then, and she understood that this was the moment he'd been building toward. "I think you know. Sometimes the most efficient thing a leader can do is recognize when it's time to step aside, to let fresh perspectives take the helm." There it was. He wanted her to quit, to save him the trouble and potential legal complications of firing someone with her tenure and track record, to go quietly into that good night of corporate redundancy. "I'll take that under consideration," she said, standing. "Was there anything else?" His smile faltered slightly at her calm response. He'd expected tears, maybe anger, certainly more desperation. "Just keep those reports coming. Daily. On time. I'm particularly interested in seeing how your team's productivity metrics compare to industry standards." As she left his office, Sarah passed Bradley in the hallway, Marcus's assistant looking harried as always, juggling coffee and files, and the constant demands of serving a petty tyrant. Their eyes met for a moment, and she saw something there. Not sympathy exactly, but a kind of exhausted recognition. He knew what his boss was. He just needed the job too badly to care. Back in Building C, her team was waiting. They'd all known where she was going, what this meeting likely meant. Tommy had even started updating his resume. She could see it on his screen before he quickly minimized it. "We're not giving up," she told them, and meant it. "We have 2 weeks left. We're going to use them." That night, Sarah met with someone she hadn't expected to become an ally. Janet from HR had called her asking to meet off campus at a diner 2 towns over where no one from Apex would see them. Janet was close to retirement, had been with the company for 23 years, and had the worn look of someone who'd seen too many Marcus Thorns come through, leaving destruction in their wake. "I can't officially help you," Janet said over coffee that was somehow worse than Building C's broken machine would have made. "But I can tell you that you're not the first to notice irregularities in Marcus's methods." "Who else has noticed?" Sarah asked. "The CFO has questions about some of the vendor contracts." The legal department is concerned about potential labor violations and how he's restructuring departments. And the CEO, well, Richard is old school. He believes in efficiency, but he also believes in loyalty. He hired you personally, didn't he? Sarah nodded, remembering that interview 11 years ago, how Richard had asked her about her vision for operations analytics, how he'd listened to her ideas with genuine interest. He's in Singapore until next week, Janet continued. Marcus scheduled the board meeting to review department eliminations while Richard is gone. Charlotte Brennan will be chairing it. Charlotte Brennan, the board member who'd brought Marcus in, who'd sung his praises as a transformer of companies. Of course. When's the meeting? Sarah asked. Friday, 9 a.m. Marcus will present his recommendations for restructuring, including the elimination of your department and 3 others. Janet pulled a folder from her bag, slid it across the table. I shouldn't be giving you this, but it's the agenda and the vendor list Marcus submitted for approval. Sarah opened the folder, scanned the documents. 4 departments on the chopping block, all to be replaced by external vendors. Combined savings of $2 million annually according to Marcus's projections. She recognized 3 of the vendor names from her research, all connected to Marcus or his wife in some way. This is evidence of nothing that would stand up without more proof, Janet interrupted. Marcus is too careful. Everything can be explained as coincidence or best practice sourcing. You need something more concrete, something undeniable. Sarah thought about the spreadsheets at home, the patterns she'd found, the threads that all led back to Marcus and his network of shell companies. What if I had that proof? Janet was quiet for a long moment. Then you'd need to present it in a way that couldn't be ignored or buried. Publicly, in front of people Marcus couldn't manipulate or intimidate, like at a board meeting. I didn't say that. Janet stood, leaving money on the table for her coffee. I'm not encouraging you to do anything. I'm just saying that if someone were to have undeniable proof of fraud, and if they were to somehow present it at a board meeting where multiple witnesses were present, including board members who had a fiduciary duty to act on such information, well, that would be difficult to sweep under the rug. After Janet left, Sarah sat in the diner for another hour thinking. She had pieces of the puzzle, but not the complete picture. She needed something that would connect all the dots, something that would show the pattern so clearly that even Charlotte Brennan couldn't ignore it. Her phone buzzed. It was Robert texting from his personal phone. Check your email. You didn't get this from me. Sarah opened her personal email on her phone. Robert had sent her a single attachment, a PDF of an invoice from Thornelite Consulting to Apex Solutions for $92,000 for executive conference room renovation consultation. The same amount as the renovation Robert had mentioned, but for consulting about the renovation, not the actual work. She called Deb immediately. Can you meet me at my apartment? Bring your laptop. The secure one. They worked through the night, Deb's fingers flying across his keyboard as he traced financial connections, Sarah cross-referencing each discovery with the documents she'd been collecting. By 3 a.m., they had it. A clear pattern of double-billing shell companies charging for services never rendered, and all of it traceable back to accounts connected to Marcus or his immediate family. This is it, Dev said, leaning back from his screen. This is enough to bury him. But Sarah, if we're wrong about any of this, if even one piece doesn't hold up, we're not wrong, Sarah said. She was exhausted, but also energized in a way she hadn't felt in weeks. But we need more than just data. We need witnesses. The next day, she began carefully reaching out. Not directly, Marcus had eyes everywhere, but through subtle conversations, feeling out who else had noticed things, who else had questions. She found unexpected allies. Bradley, Marcus's own assistant, who'd been documenting his own concerns after being asked to process invoices he knew were fraudulent. I need this job, he told Sarah in a whispered conversation by the Building C vending machines. But I won't go to jail for him. Raj from accounting, who'd been pressured to approve payments that didn't match purchase orders. He said it was about streamlining processes, Raj explained. But it felt wrong. I've been keeping copies of everything. Even Charlotte Brennan's own assistant, Patricia, who'd noticed discrepancies in the reports Marcus had been feeding to her boss. Ms. Brennan trusts him, Patricia said carefully, but she trusts data more. If someone were to present contradicting data, Sarah had 4 days until the board meeting. 4 days to build an airtight case and find a way to present it. The problem was she wasn't invited to the meeting. Her department was on the agenda, but only as a line item to be eliminated. It was Lisa who solved that problem. The quarterly operations review, she said, bursting into their Building C cave with an energy Sarah hadn't seen since before Marcus arrived. It's the same day right before the board meeting. All department heads present to the board. You're still a department head until they officially eliminate us. Sarah checked the calendar. Lisa was right. The quarterly review was scheduled for 8 a.m. an hour before Marcus's restructuring presentation. Every department head would present their numbers for Q3, including her. She'd have 15 minutes in front of the board. 15 minutes to save not just her department, but to expose Marcus's entire scheme. It's not enough time, Tommy said when she explained the plan to her team. 15 minutes to explain financial fraud, they'll cut you off. Not if we do it right, Sarah said. She looked at her team, these brilliant, loyal people who'd followed her into corporate exile. I need everyone's help. Dev, can you create a visualization that shows the financial flow in a way that's immediately understandable? Give me 2 days, Dev said. Lisa, I need you to coordinate with our allies. Make sure everyone knows to be in that room. We need witnesses. On it. Tommy, you're our backup. Everything we present needs to be loaded on multiple devices, backed up to the cloud, printed in hard copy. If Marcus tries to kill the presentation, technically, we need alternatives. Tommy nodded, already making notes. Sarah looked at them all. If this doesn't work, we're all probably finished at Apex. You understand that, right? Marcus will destroy anyone connected to this. He's already destroying us, Dev pointed out. At least this way, we go down fighting. The next 3 days were a blur of preparation. Sarah barely slept, refining her presentation, anticipating objections, gathering more evidence. Robert helped by providing access to areas of the building she shouldn't have been able to reach, always with plausible deniability. Just checking the air conditioning in the server room, he'd say loudly while she downloaded financial records. Janet from HR made sure certain documents found their way into Sarah's hands, Marcus's original employment agreement, which specifically prohibited conflicts of interest, like hiring your own company as a vendor. Patricia managed to get Sarah a copy of the board packet Marcus had prepared so she could see exactly what lies he was planning to tell. The night before the board meeting, Sarah sat in her apartment surrounded by papers and laptops and empty coffee cups. Her presentation was ready, 15 slides that told the story of Marcus's fraud in clear, undeniable terms. Dev's visualizations were brilliant, complex financial malfeasance, reduced to simple flows that anyone could understand. Lisa had confirmations from 17 people who would be in that room as witnesses. Tommy had the presentation loaded on 7 different devices and had even prepared physical boards as a last resort. Her phone rang. It was her sister, Amy. "How are you holding up?" Amy asked. "I'm about to either save my career or destroy it completely," Sarah said. "Possibly both." "You're doing the right thing," Amy said. "Whatever happens, you're standing up to corruption. That matters." After they hung up, Sarah looked at the presentation one more time. The first slide was simple, just a title: Operational Efficiency and Fiduciary Responsibility, a Critical Review. Boring, non-threatening. The kind of title that wouldn't raise any alarms until it was too late. She allowed herself a small smile. Marcus had taught her something valuable over the past few weeks. He'd taught her that the language of corporate speak could be weaponized, that efficiency could cut both ways, that sometimes the best revenge wasn't about destroying your enemy, it was about letting them destroy themselves while you simply held up the mirror. Tomorrow she would walk into that boardroom one more time. Not as the operations analyst being pushed out, but as something Marcus had never expected her to become, a threat. The morning of the board meeting arrived gray and humid, the kind of Southern California day that couldn't decide if it wanted to rain or just make everyone miserable with indecision. Sarah arrived at Apex at 6 a.m., partly to prepare, partly because she couldn't sleep anyway. Building C was empty except for the overnight security guard who nodded at her with something that might have been respect or might have been pity. She set up in their makeshift conference room, reviewing her notes one final time. Her team arrived one by one, Lisa at 6:30 with coffee from the Good Place downtown, Dev at 6:45 with his laptops and backup drives, Tommy at 7:00 with printed copies of everything. "You ready for this?" Lisa asked. Sarah looked at her team, these people who'd stood by her through corporate exile and were about to walk into what might be career suicide with her. "Are you, all of you, it's not too late to—" "We're with you," Dev interrupted, "all the way." At 7:45, they walked from Building C to Building A, a funeral procession in business casual. Sarah could feel eyes on them as they passed through the lobby, whispers following in their wake. Everyone knew about the board meeting about the departments on the chopping block. They probably looked like dead men walking. The boardroom was on the 20th floor, all glass and chrome and intimidation. Sarah had presented here dozens of times over the years, but it had never felt like this, like entering an arena. Board members were already arriving, settling into their seats with coffee and small talk. Richard Huang, the CEO, was notably present back from Singapore earlier than expected. He caught Sarah's eye and nodded slightly. Charlotte Brennan sat at the center of the table reviewing papers with the intense focus of someone who didn't like surprises. Marcus sat to her right, looking confident and well-rested, his presentation already queued up on the main screen. He saw Sarah and her team enter and frowned slightly. "Sarah," he said with false warmth that didn't reach his eyes, "I didn't realize your whole team would be attending." "They're stakeholders in the operational review," Sarah said calmly, setting up her laptop at the presenter's position. "I thought their presence would be valuable for context." Marcus's frown deepened, but Charlotte Brennan was already calling the meeting to order. "Let's begin with the quarterly reviews. Sarah, you're first on the agenda." This was it. Sarah stood her hand steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her. She clicked to her first slide, that boring, non-threatening title that promised nothing controversial. "Good morning," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the room. "I want to talk to you about efficiency." Marcus actually smirked at that, leaning back in his chair. He had no idea what was coming. Over the past 6 weeks, Sarah continued, clicking to her next slide. "Our company has undergone significant restructuring in the name of operational efficiency. My department has been at the center of this transformation, which has given us a unique perspective on the true cost of these changes." The slide showed a simple graph, Apex's operational costs over the past quarter. Nothing controversial yet, just data. "On the surface, the numbers look good," Sarah said. "We've cut costs by 15%, we've eliminated redundancies, we've streamlined processes." She clicked again. "But I'd like to direct your attention to some interesting patterns we've discovered during our analysis." The next slide was Dev's first visualization. It showed money flowing from Apex to various vendors, color-coded and animated. At first, it looked like normal business operations. Then Dev had programmed it to highlight specific flows, and the pattern became clear: money cycling through shell companies and returning to a central node labeled Thorn Elite Consulting. Sarah heard someone's sharp intake of breath. Marcus had gone very still. "This is highly irregular," Marcus said, starting to stand. "This isn't on the agenda." "Actually, it is," Richard Huang said quietly. "Operational efficiency review includes all operational expenses. Please continue, Sarah." Sarah clicked to the next slide. Invoice after invoice, each one paired with its corresponding service, or in most cases, the lack thereof. "We've identified $2.3 million in payments to vendors that either don't exist or have provided no actual services. All of these vendors were approved by Mr. Thorne, and all of them have connections to companies registered to either Mr. Thorne or his immediate family." The room erupted. Board members were leaning forward, examining the data. Charlotte Brennan's face had gone pale. Marcus was on his feet, now his face flushed. "This is slander," he said. "These are baseless accusations." "They're not accusations," Sarah said calmly. She clicked again. "They're facts. Here's the registration for Thorn Elite Consulting, showing Mrs. Victoria Thorne as the principal owner. Here's the invoice for consulting services that were never provided. Here's the approval signed by Mr. Thorne for payment to his wife's company." She clicked again. Another visualization, this one showing the Building C maintenance budget. "We were told there was no money to fix our air conditioning despite a $47,000 allocation for Building C improvements. That money was redirected to another vendor, Efficiency Solutions LLC, registered to the same address as Mr. Thorne's previous company. You had no right to access these records," Marcus said, his voice rising. "This is a violation of corporate policy." "Actually," Bradley said, standing up from where he'd been sitting quietly in the corner, "I provided many of these records. As Mr. Thorne's assistant, I became concerned about the invoices I was being asked to process. I felt it was my fiduciary duty to report potential fraud." Marcus turned to stare at Bradley, betrayal and rage warring on his face. "You work for me." "I work for Apex Solutions," Bradley said quietly, "and I won't be complicit in theft." Sarah clicked to her next slide. This one showed the 4 departments Marcus had targeted for elimination with the vendors lined up to replace them. The pattern is consistent. Eliminate internal departments, replace them with external vendors that charge more for less service, and those vendors all trace back to the same network of ownership. Raj from accounting stood up. I can confirm these numbers. I've been documenting the pressure to approve these payments despite clear violations of our procurement policies. Patricia Charlotte Brennan's assistant spoke up from her seat. I've also been tracking discrepancies in the reports submitted to Ms. Brennan. The numbers presented to the board don't match the internal financials. Charlotte Brennan finally spoke, her voice cold. Marcus, do you have an explanation for this? Marcus's face had gone from red to white. He looked around the room, seeming to realize for the first time that this wasn't just Sarah's rebellion, it was a coordinated exposure. There must be some misunderstanding. These vendors were selected through proper channels. Were they? Richard Huang asked. He'd been quiet until now, but Sarah could see he'd been reviewing the data on his tablet. Because it looks to me like you've been systematically defrauding this company, using your position to enrich yourself and your family. I saved this company money, Marcus said desperately. The efficiency improvements were a smokescreen, Sarah interrupted. She clicked to her final slide. It was simple a comparison of the supposed savings versus the money redirected to fraudulent vendors. The net loss to Apex was clear $1.7 million in just 6 weeks. You didn't make us more efficient, Sarah said, looking directly at Marcus. You made us victims of embezzlement, and you tried to destroy anyone who might notice. The room was silent for a moment. Then Charlotte Brennan stood. Mr. Thorne, you're suspended immediately pending a full investigation. Security will escort you from the building. You can't, Marcus started. I can, and I am, Charlotte said. And if these allegations prove true, which looking at this evidence seems extremely likely, you'll be facing criminal charges. 2 security guards entered the room. Sarah recognized one of them. It was the overnight guard from Building C who'd nodded at her this morning. He looked like he was trying not to smile as he approached Marcus. This isn't over, Marcus said to Sarah as security flanked him. You think you've won, I'll sue you for defamation. I'll destroy your career. Mr. Thorne. Richard Huang said, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd built the company from nothing. I'd be very careful about making threats in a room full of witnesses, especially when you're about to be under federal investigation for fraud. Marcus was escorted out his exit, watched by everyone he'd terrorized over the past 6 weeks. As the door closed behind him, there was a moment of silence. Then Charlotte Brennan turned to Sarah. Ms. Chen, she said formally, I owe you an apology. I brought Marcus in. I championed him. I ignored the warning signs because I was blinded by his promises of efficiency and growth. We all were to some extent, Richard said. Sarah, what do you need to stabilize operations while we sort this out? Sarah looked at her team, Lisa, Dev, Tommy, all of them grinning now with relief and exhaustion. First, we need to move back to Building A. Building C is literally making my team sick. Second, we need to reverse the budget cuts that were actually cuts versus the ones that were redirecting funds. Third, I need authority to audit all of Marcus's decisions over the past 6 weeks. Done, Richard said immediately. And Sarah, that 15% raise Marcus denied you when he arrived. Consider it approved, backdated to 6 weeks ago. Same for your team. As the board meeting continued, now focused on damage control and investigation, Sarah stepped out onto the balcony for a moment of air. Lisa followed her. You did it, Lisa said. You actually did it. Sarah looked out over the city, feeling the weight of the past 6 weeks finally lifting. We did it. All of us. I couldn't have. Sarah. She turned to see Robert standing in the doorway, still in his facilities uniform. Just wanted to say that was beautiful. Watching him get walked out like that, beautiful. How did you even get up here? Lisa asked. Robert grinned. I got keys to every door in this building. Figured I should see how this played out. He paused. Also, the AC in Building C, it'll be fixed by tomorrow. Funny how we suddenly found budget for it. That afternoon, Sarah and her team moved back to their original office space. It felt surreal carrying their boxes back through the same hallways they'd been exiled from. Other employees watched, some applauding, some just nodding with respect. Word had already spread through the building Marcus Thorne was gone, arrested by federal agents who'd been waiting in the lobby, apparently tipped off by someone in the board meeting. Think he'll actually go to prison? Tommy asked as they unpacked. White-collar crime, Dev said cynically. He'll probably get a fine in community service. But Sarah had insider information from her sister. Amy had called during lunch, having heard through legal channels about the arrest. The FBI's been building a case against him for months, Amy had said. Your evidence was the missing piece. He's looking at serious time. As the day wound down, Sarah sat in her real office with windows and working air conditioning, and a door that actually locked and pulled up the email Marcus had sent on his first day. The one about efficiency being a moral imperative, about cutting the fat, about transformation through disruption. She forwarded it to the all-company distribution list with a simple addition. Effective immediately, the operations analytics team will be conducting a comprehensive audit of all efficiency improvements implemented over the past 6 weeks. If you've been affected by unexplained budget cuts, redirected funds, or suspicious vendor relationships, please contact us. Real efficiency isn't about destroying what works, it's about building something better. Also, the coffee makers are being reinstated immediately. That's not inefficiency, that's humanity. Sarah Chen, Director of Operations Analytics. Within minutes, her inbox was flooded with responses. Stories of departments, gutted projects, canceled people, pushed out, all in the name of efficiency that was really just theft. It would take months to undo all the damage Marcus had done, but at least now they could start. That evening, Sarah's team insisted on taking her out to celebrate. They went to a dive bar near the office, the kind of place Marcus would have sneered at for being inefficient with its generous pours and lack of artisanal anything. A toast, Lisa said, raising her beer. To Sarah, who took on a corporate psychopath and won. To the team, Sarah countered. Nobody wins alone. They drank, and for the first time in 6 weeks, Sarah felt like she could actually taste it. So what happens now? Tommy asked. I mean, Marcus is gone, but the position's still open. They'll bring in another COO eventually. Sarah had been thinking about that. Richard had pulled her aside after the board meeting, hinting that the position might be hers if she wanted it. But sitting here with her team, with these people who'd walked through fire with her, she knew what her answer would be. Let them bring in someone new, she said. I've got a department to run, and this time if someone tries to optimize us out of existence, we'll be ready. How? Dev asked. Sarah smiled. Because now we know what to look for. The patterns, the red flags, the language that sounds like progress, but is really just theft. We've been immunized. Her phone buzzed. It was a text from Robert. Check the news. She pulled up the local news site. The headline was brutal in its simplicity. Apex Solutions COO arrested for embezzlement fraud. But it was the subtitle that made her smile. Scheme exposed by employees he tried to eliminate. We're famous, Tommy said, reading over her shoulder. We're anonymous sources, Sarah corrected, which is exactly how I want it. But the truth had a way of spreading through corporate networks faster than any official communication. By the next morning, Sarah was getting LinkedIn messages from operations analysts at other companies sharing their own stories of Marcus Thorne-style efficiency experts and asking for advice on how to fight back. She started a simple spreadsheet documenting the patterns they'd identified, the red flags to watch for. Within a week, it had grown into a full guide that was being shared across the industry. The Operations Analyst Guide to Identifying Corporate Fraud. Authored anonymously, but somehow everyone knew it came from the team that had taken down Marcus Thorne. 3 weeks later, Sarah was called into Richard's office. She expected another conversation about the COO position, but Richard had something else in mind. The board wants to create a new position, he said. Chief Integrity Officer. Someone whose job is to audit efficiency improvements, vendor relationships, any significant operational changes, to make sure we never have another Marcus Thorne situation. That sounds like internal affairs for corporations, Sarah said. That's exactly what it is, and I want you to build it. Your team would report directly to the board outside the normal hierarchy, untouchable by any single executive, including me. Sarah thought about it. It would mean giving up some of the day-to-day operations work she loved, but it would also mean protecting others from what she'd experienced. Can I keep my team? I'd be insulted if you didn't. That night, Sarah called her sister to share the news. Chief Integrity Officer, Amy said, laughing. You're like a corporate superhero now. More like a corporate immune system, Sarah said. We're the antibodies. 6 months later, Sarah stood in front of a conference room full of executives from various companies presenting on corporate fraud prevention. It was surreal how she'd become an expert on something she'd never wanted to learn about. But as she looked at the faces in the audience, some eager, some skeptical, some probably planning their own Marcus Thorne-style schemes, she felt the weight of responsibility. The most dangerous efficiency expert, she began, is the one who makes you feel stupid for questioning them, who uses complexity and jargon to hide simple theft, who makes you feel like your job depends on not looking too closely at the numbers. She clicked to a slide showing Marcus's mugshot from his arrest. Several people in the audience shifted uncomfortably. Marcus Thorne wasn't a genius. He wasn't even particularly creative. He just counted on people being too afraid, too exhausted, or too gaslit to fight back. He weaponized corporate culture against itself. She clicked again, showing the Building C photo her team had taken on their worst day there, all of them looking exhausted and miserable, but still together. But here's what he didn't count on, that the same people he tried to destroy would be the ones documenting everything. That the assistant he treated like furniture would keep receipts. That the facilities manager he ignored would provide access. That the HR representative he thought he'd intimidated would be secretly building a case. The presentation continued for another hour, walking through the specific tactics, the warning signs, the ways to build protection into corporate structures. But Sarah kept coming back to one theme: the importance of believing people when they say something's wrong, of not dismissing concerns as resistance to change or lack of vision. After the presentation, a young analyst approached her, looking nervous. "I think my company might be going through something similar," she said quietly. "But I'm just an analyst. Nobody listens to me." Sarah handed her a business card. "They'll listen to us. Send me what you have. We'll help you build the case." It had become her unofficial side mission, helping other departments, other companies identify and stop their own Marcus Thornes. Lisa called it the Corporate Fraud Underground Railroad, which was probably overselling it, but Sarah liked the spirit of the name. A year after Marcus's arrest, the trial finally went to court. Sarah had to testify, walking through the evidence she'd presented in that boardroom, explaining how she'd identified the patterns. Marcus sat at the defendant's table, looking smaller somehow, his confident swagger replaced by desperate attention to his lawyer's whispers. During cross-examination, Marcus's lawyer tried to paint Sarah as a disgruntled employee seeking revenge for her demotion. "Isn't it true that Mr. Thorne had placed your department under performance review?" the lawyer asked. "Yes," Sarah said simply. "And isn't it true that you were facing termination?" "That was certainly Mr. Thorne's intention." "So you had personal motivation to fabricate these allegations?" Sarah looked directly at Marcus for the first time since his arrest. "I had personal motivation to document everything. There's a difference between revenge and justice. I wanted justice. But surely you felt anger, resentment." Sarah thought about those weeks in Building C, about Tommy's cough and Dev's migraines and Lisa's tears. "I felt a lot of things, but mostly I felt responsible. For my team, for the company, for stopping someone who was stealing from all of us while telling us we weren't efficient enough to deserve functioning air conditioning." The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours, guilty on all counts. Marcus was sentenced to 5 years in federal prison and ordered to pay $3.2 million in restitution. As he was led away in handcuffs, he looked back at Sarah once. She expected to see hatred, but instead saw something else. A kind of bewildered confusion, like he still didn't understand how his perfect scheme had failed. Outside the courthouse, Sarah's team was waiting. They'd all taken the day off to attend the sentencing. Even Robert was there, having driven 2 hours to be present for the finale. "How does it feel?" a reporter asked, shoving a microphone at Sarah. She thought about it. "Like the air conditioning finally works." The reporter looked confused, but her team laughed, understanding perfectly. They went back to that same dive bar, to the same booth where they'd celebrated Marcus's arrest a year ago. The bartender, who knew their story by now, sent over a round on the house. "So what now?" Tommy asked. He'd been promoted twice in the past year, but still had that eager junior analyst energy. "Marcus is gone, the fraud's been exposed, systems are in place. Happy ending, right?" Sarah looked at her beer thinking. There's always another Marcus Thorne, maybe not as obvious, maybe not as greedy, but someone who thinks efficiency matters more than people. Someone who believes that everything human is just fat to be trimmed. "That's depressing," Lisa said. "No," Sarah said, "it's realistic. But here's the thing, there's also always us. The people who document, who question, who refuse to be optimized out of existence. We just have to keep watching." Her phone buzzed. Another LinkedIn message from another analyst at another company, seeing patterns they didn't like, asking for help. Sarah showed it to her team. "The Underground Railroad continues," Dev said with a grin. Sarah raised her glass. "To inefficiency," she said. "To coffee makers and working air conditioning and the time it takes to do things right. To the humanity that can't be optimized away. They toasted, and Sarah felt the satisfaction of work that mattered. Not the work of making numbers look better on spreadsheets, but the work of protecting people from those who would sacrifice them for percentage points. 3 years passed. Sarah's chief integrity officer role had expanded to include a team of 12, all former targets of various Marcus Thorne-style executives who'd been recruited to help prevent future corporate predation. They developed what became known industry-wide as the Chen Protocol, a systematic approach to identifying and preventing executive fraud. She was reviewing quarterly reports when Richard knocked on her door. He still ran the company but had taken to deferring to Sarah on all matters of operational integrity. "We have a situation," he said. "Charlotte Brennan is recommending another efficiency expert for the COO position." Sarah's stomach tightened. Charlotte had never fully recovered from the embarrassment of bringing in Marcus had spent 3 years trying to rebuild her reputation. Who? Someone named Victoria Ashworth. Impressive resume. Turned around 3 companies in the last 5 years. Sarah was already pulling up her research databases. "Give me 2 hours." It took less than one. Victoria Ashworth was clean on the surface, but the patterns were there if you knew how to look. Companies she'd turned around had all experienced massive layoffs, followed by contracts with consulting firms that traced back to a holding company in Delaware. A holding company with connections to— "You've got to be kidding me," Sarah muttered. "Victoria Thorne, Marcus's wife using her maiden name." Sarah compiled the evidence quickly but thoroughly, then walked to the board meeting that was already in session. She didn't wait to be invited in. "Ms. Chen," Charlotte said coldly, "we're in the middle of— Victoria Ashworth is Victoria Thorne," Sarah said simply. "Marcus's wife, the one who owned Thorne Elite Consulting. She's using her maiden name and a sanitized resume, but it's her." The room went silent. Charlotte's face went through several shades of red before settling on a kind of purple. "I'll withdraw the recommendation," Charlotte said quietly. "With respect," Sarah said, "I think you should step down from the board." Everyone turned to stare at her. "You didn't just tell board members to resign, especially not ones as powerful as Charlotte Brennan. This is the second time you've nearly brought a thorn into this company," Sarah continued. "Either you're complicit or you're incompetent. Either way, you're a liability." Charlotte stood gathering her things with icy dignity. "You'll regret this, Miss Chen." "No," Sarah said, "I won't." Charlotte left, and the board voted immediately to accept her resignation. Richard looked at Sarah with something between admiration and concern. "You just made a powerful enemy," he said. "I already had powerful enemies. At least now they know I'm watching." The story of Victoria Ashworth's attempted infiltration made the business news another chapter in what the media had dubbed the Thorne Scandal. Sarah gave one interview to a business journalist who'd been following the story from the beginning. "How did you know to look?" the journalist asked. "Because predators don't change their patterns," Sarah said. "They just change their hunting grounds. The Thorns of the world believe they're entitled to eat companies alive to digest them for profit. They think we're too busy, too scared, or too naive to stop them. But we're not. Not anymore." What would you say to other employees who might be facing their own Marcus Thorne? Sarah looked directly at the camera. "Document everything. Find your allies, they're there, even if they're hiding. And remember that efficiency without humanity isn't efficiency at all. It's just cruelty with a business degree." The interview went viral, shared across every business platform, tagged by thousands of employees who'd faced their own corporate predators. Sarah's inbox exploded with stories, requests for help, and occasionally threats from executives who didn't appreciate her message. One email stood out. It was from Marcus Thorne himself, sent from federal prison through his lawyer. "Ms. Chen," it read, "I want you to know that I've had considerable time to reflect on our interactions. You were right about one thing. I underestimated you. I saw an operations analyst where I should have seen an adversary. That was my inefficiency. But you were wrong about something too. This isn't over. There are more of us than there are of you. And we're patient, Mr. Thorne." Sarah forwarded the email to the FBI agent handling the case, then added it to her file on the Thorns. Let him make threats from his cell. She had work to do. 5 years after the original confrontation, Sarah stood in Building C, now completely renovated and turned into a training center for corporate integrity officers. The irony wasn't lost on her. The place where Marcus had tried to bury her department had become the place where people learned to fight people like Marcus. She was teaching a class of new analysts, all of them young and eager and utterly unprepared for the Marcus Thorns they'd eventually face. The first thing you need to understand, she said, standing in the exact spot where their old broken fan had sat, is that corporate predators aren't obvious villains. They're charming. They're credentialed. They speak the language of progress and efficiency and transformation. They'll make you feel small for questioning them, outdated for valuing stability, inefficient for being human. One of the students raised her hand. But how do you fight someone who controls your job, your income, your career? Sarah smiled, remembering asking herself the same question in this very room. You remember that they need the company more than the company needs them. Parasites can't survive without a host. So you document their feeding. You find others who've been bitten. And when you have enough evidence, you expose them to sunlight. Did you always know you'd win? Another student asked. Sarah thought about those dark days in Building C, about counting breaths, to keep from screaming about watching her team suffer for the crime of existing in Marcus's path. No, she said honestly. There were days I thought he'd destroy us all. But I knew that even if we lost, we'd make it costly for him. We'd leave a trail that others could follow. We'd make it harder for the next Marcus Thorn. She paused. And sometimes that's all you can do. Make it harder for the predators. Make them work for their meals. Make them visible. After class, Sarah walked back to Building A, to her real office with its windows and functioning everything. Lisa was there now, running her own department. Dev had moved to Silicon Valley but still called weekly with intelligence about efficiency experts targeting tech companies. Tommy was in law school, inspired by the trial to become a prosecutor, specializing in corporate crime. Any new Marcus sightings, Lisa asked, using their shorthand for corporate predators. 3 this week, Sarah said. 1 in Dallas, 1 in Boston, 1 in Seattle. I've connected the targets with each other. They're building cases. The Underground Railroad grows, Lisa said with satisfaction. Sarah's phone rang. It was Richard. Turn on the news, he said. Idam. Sarah found the remote, clicked to the business channel. The headline made her sink into her chair. Marcus Thorn released early for good behavior. Plans corporate consulting comeback. The anchor was interviewing Marcus outside the federal facility, looking older, but still radiating that dangerous confidence. I've learned from my mistakes, he was saying. I'm ready to bring real efficiency to companies that understand the future of business. Son of a bitch, Lisa said. Sarah's phone was already ringing. Other integrity officers, analysts from companies across the country, all seeing the same threat. Marcus Thorn was free and he'd be looking for new hunting grounds. But Sarah noticed something else in the footage. Behind Marcus, trying to stay out of camera view, was Victoria. Still using her maiden name professionally, still running her consulting firm, now reunited with her husband. They were planning something. Sarah started a new file, Thorn 2.0. Then she sent a message to her network, hundreds of integrity officers and analysts, and forgotten employees who'd learned to fight back. Marcus Thorn is out. Victoria Ashworth is active. They'll be subtle this time, careful, having learned from their mistakes. But we've learned too. Watch for new consulting firms, especially ones promising transformation through efficiency. Watch for executives who discourage documentation, who isolate departments, who use complexity to hide simple theft. And when you see them, you know what to do. Document, connect, expose. The predators are evolving, but so are we. Within an hour, she had 40 responses. People sharing intelligence patterns they'd noticed, new names to investigate. The network had grown beyond anything Sarah had imagined when she'd sat in Building C counting her breaths. It wasn't just about stopping Marcus Thorn anymore. It was about stopping all the Marcus Thorns, all the efficiency prophets who saw human beings as inefficiencies to be eliminated. That night, Sarah met with someone unexpected, Bradley, Marcus's former assistant. He'd become a whistleblower advocate after the trial, helping other executive assistants recognize and report fraud. He'd asked to meet at the old diner where Sarah had once met with Janet from HR. He contacted me, Bradley said without preamble. Marcus, he wants me to work for him again. Sarah set down her coffee carefully. And I said I'd think about it. Before Sarah could respond, Bradley continued. I want to be inside, to document what he's planning, to stop him before he destroys another company. That's dangerous, Sarah said. He knows you betrayed him once. He thinks I was coerced, that you manipulated me. He's narcissistic enough to believe I'd come back. Bradley pulled out a phone. I've already got surveillance equipment, audio-video keystroke loggers. All legal, since he'd be hiring me as a contractor, not an employee. Sarah studied him. The nervous assistant who'd accidentally forwarded that first email had become someone harder, someone who'd found purpose in the fight. You'd be completely on your own if you're caught. I know, Bradley met her eyes. But someone has to do it. And I know his patterns better than anyone except maybe you. Sarah made a decision. Not alone. We'll create a support structure. Daily check-ins, dead man switches, extraction protocols if things go bad. You'll be inside, but you won't be alone. They spent the next 2 hours building a plan. Bradley would accept Marcus's offer, but on his terms, contractor status, remote work, when possible, specific boundaries that would seem reasonable, but actually gave him room to operate. Sarah would coordinate from the outside, ready to move the moment they had actionable intelligence. As they left the diner, Bradley paused. Why do you keep fighting? You won. You're safe. You could just stop. Sarah thought about Tommy's cough in Building C, about Lisa's tears, about all the employees in all the Building Cs that Marcus and his ilk had created and would create again. Because someone has to, she said. Because they count on us getting tired, moving on, forgetting. But I don't forget. Building C made sure of that. 2 weeks later, Bradley was inside. Marcus had set up a new consulting firm, Apex Efficiency Partners, a name so brazenly close to his former target that it had to be intentional. Victoria was the official owner, but Marcus was the strategic mind. They were already in talks with 3 companies, all mid-sized firms with healthy profits but perceived inefficiencies. Sarah watched from afar as Marcus began his old patterns. The charm offensive with board members, the promises of transformation, the subtle undermining of existing leadership. But this time she wasn't waiting for him to strike first. She reached out to the operations heads at all 3 companies Marcus was courting. 2 were skeptical of her warnings. Marcus had been careful to present himself as reformed, had even given talks about learning from his mistakes. But the third, a woman named Jennifer, who ran operations for a healthcare technology firm, listened. He's already started the isolation process, Jennifer said during their video call, suggesting I move my team to a different building for focused innovation. It seemed reasonable until you explained the pattern. Document everything, Sarah said. Every interaction, every suggestion, every email. Build your allies now before he turns them against you. And Jennifer, don't move to that other building. Make him fire you if he has to, but don't go quietly into exile. The chess match had begun again, but this time Sarah wasn't playing defense. She was teaching others the game, showing them Marcus's moves before he made them. It wasn't about revenge anymore that had been settled in a courtroom years ago. This was about prevention, about immunity, about making sure the Building Cs of the corporate world stayed empty. One night while reviewing Bradley's latest intelligence, Sarah found something that made her blood run cold. Marcus wasn't just planning to infiltrate companies anymore. He was planning to buy one, using investor money he'd raised from people who either didn't know or didn't care about his history. He was positioning to purchase a controlling stake in a manufacturing firm with 800 employees. 800 people who would become his, to optimize to efficiency, to destroy in the name of profit. Sarah called an emergency meeting of what Lisa had dubbed the Integrity League, the network of corporate defenders they'd built over the years. 50 people joined the video call faces, appearing in boxes like a corporate Brady Bunch of determination. We can't let him buy Morrison Manufacturing, Sarah said without preamble. If he gets control of an entire company, he won't need to hide his methods. He'll have free reign. What can we do? Asked David from the Seattle group. It's a legal business transaction. We make it unprofitable, Sarah said. We make Marcus Thorne such a toxic brand that no investor will touch him, no board will sell to him, no employee will work for him. They spent the next 3 hours strategizing. They would launch a coordinated information campaign, not lies or defamation, just truth. Every article about Marcus's conviction, every testimony from his victims, every pattern of his behavior, documented and disseminated. They would make sure that anyone Googling Marcus Thorne or Apex Efficiency Partners would know exactly who they were dealing with. But Sarah knew information wasn't enough. They needed something more dramatic, more undeniable. She needed to talk to someone she'd hoped never to speak with again. The next day, she drove to a minimum security facility 2 hours outside the city. Not to visit Marcus, he was already out, but to see someone else who'd been caught in his wake. Theodore Brennan Charlotte's son, who'd been convicted of insider trading based on information Marcus had fed him. Theodore was younger than Sarah had expected, maybe 30, with the hollow look of someone who'd lost everything before he'd really had a chance to have anything. "Why are you here?" he asked when she sat down across from him in the visiting room. "Marcus is trying to buy a company," Sarah said. "I want to stop him." Theodore laughed bitterly. "Good luck with that. He's got investors who don't care about his past. They just see the returns he promises. What if those investors knew he was planning to defraud them too?" Theodore's expression sharpened. "What do you know?" "Nothing yet. But you knew him before, during, and after his Apex scheme. You know things that weren't part of the trial. Help me stop him, and maybe we can help you too." Theodore was quiet for a long moment. "There are recordings," he said finally. "Conversations where Marcus explicitly discussed defrauding investors after taking control of companies. He thought he was being clever speaking in code, but it's clear if you know the context. My mother had them in her personal files. Where are men are now? Her estate's storage unit, Unit 447 at Secure Store on Wilmington. The keys hidden in a fake rock by the door. She was paranoid about losing things." He paused. "The recordings are in a blue filing box marked Tax Documents 2019. She thought she was protecting him by hiding them." Sarah stood to leave, then turned back. "Why help me? He's out there, and you're in here." "Because I was young and stupid, but he was evil and smart. There's a difference." Theodore looked at his hands. "And because someone needs to stop him before he does to others what he did to my family." Sarah found the storage unit that evening. Everything was exactly where Theodore had said. The recordings were damning Marcus explicitly discussing how to extract value from companies and leave investors holding worthless shells. It was a blueprint for corporate murder. She made copies, consulted with Amy about the legal implications of using them, then sent them to 3 investigative journalists who'd been following the Thorne story. By morning, the headlines were everywhere. "Leaked recordings reveal Thorne's plan to defraud investors." Marcus's deal to buy Morrison Manufacturing fell apart within 48 hours. Investors pulled out, the board rejected his offer, and 3 regulatory agencies opened new investigations. But Sarah knew it wasn't over. It never would be, not really. Marcus would find new strategies, new approaches, new ways to feed on corporate vulnerability. But so would she. So would the network. So would everyone who'd learned that efficiency without humanity was just another word for predation. A month later, Sarah received a package at her office. No return address, but she recognized the handwriting. Inside was a single photo, the Building C conference room where her team had been exiled. Someone had spray painted a message on the wall. Sarah Chen was right. She didn't know if it was a threat or a tribute, if it came from Marcus or from someone he'd tried to destroy. But she framed it anyway, hung it on her office wall next to the photo of her team from their worst day. A reminder of where they'd been and why they fought. Lisa saw it during their weekly meeting. "That's either really inspiring or really creepy," she said. "Both," Sarah agreed. "It's both." Her phone buzzed. Another message from the network. Another efficiency expert targeting another company. Another battle beginning. Sarah looked at the photo one more time, that broken room where she'd learned to fight back, then turned to her computer. Time to get to work. The message was from Portland. A small tech company, a new COO, promising transformation and the familiar pattern beginning. Sarah opened a new file, began her research, started connecting the defenders. It was exhausting, this constant vigilance, but it was also necessary. Because in the end, that's what the Marcus Thornes of the world never understood. They thought efficiency was about eliminating the human element, about reducing everything to numbers and metrics and profit margins. But real efficiency, real strength came from the opposite, from the human connections that couldn't be optimized, away from the loyalty that couldn't be outsourced, from the determination that grew stronger with every attempt to break it. Sarah thought about her team, scattered now but still connected. Lisa running her department with humanity and strength. Dev protecting Silicon Valley startups from corporate predators. Tommy preparing to prosecute the next generation of white-collar criminals. Bradley still inside enemy territory, still feeding intelligence, still fighting from within. They'd all been forged in Building C, transformed by Marcus's attempt to destroy them into something he never expected: antibodies in the corporate system, an immune response to efficiency without conscience. Her computer dinged. The Portland company's operations manager had responded, already eager for help, grateful for the warning. Sarah smiled and began typing her response, sharing the patterns, the warning signs, the ways to fight back. Outside her window, Building C stood empty now, the renovation having moved to another phase. But Sarah knew it wasn't really empty. It was full of ghosts, not just of her team's exile, but of every employee who'd ever been optimized out of existence, every person who'd been deemed inefficient by someone who mistook cruelty for leadership. But it was also full of something else: resistance, resilience. The proof that even in the worst circumstances, in the most broken spaces, people could find ways to fight back, to protect each other, to build something better from the ruins of what someone tried to destroy. Sarah saved her work, backed it up to 3 different drives, a habit she'd never broken, and prepared for the next battle. Marcus was still out there, Victoria too, and countless others like them. But so was she. So was the network. So were all the people who'd learned that the best revenge wasn't destruction, it was prevention, protection, and the patient work of making the world a little less hospitable to predators. The war between efficiency and humanity would never really end. But today, in this moment, in this fight, humanity was winning. And that was enough. That was everything. As she left the office that night, Sarah stopped by Building C one more time. The door was locked, but she could see through the windows to where their old conference room had been. Someone had left a light on, and in the gentle glow, the space looked almost peaceful. Almost like a place where people could work without fear, create, without constantly defending their right to exist, be human, without apology. Someday, maybe. But until then, she had work to do. Sarah Chen walked back to her car, counting her breaths, 4 and hold 6, out not from anxiety this time, but from habit, from rhythm, from the learned patience of someone who discovered that sometimes the best revenge was simply refusing to be optimized out of existence. Behind her, Building C stood silent in the darkness, a monument to corporate cruelty and human resilience, to the worst of efficiency culture and the best of human resistance. And in offices across the country, in conference rooms and cubicles, in Building C's of their own, Sarah's network watched and waited and prepared. The predators were still hunting, but now finally they were being hunted too. The story could end here, with Sarah walking away from Building C with the network established and Marcus temporarily defeated. But real stories, corporate stories, human stories don't end cleanly. They continue in quarterly reports and performance reviews, in small victories and smaller defeats, in the daily choice between efficiency and humanity. 6 months after the Morrison manufacturing deal fell through, Sarah got a call that changed everything. It was from Richard, and his voice had an edge she'd never heard before. "Sarah, I need you to come to my office now. Don't talk to anyone on your way." She found Richard standing at his window, looking older than she'd ever seen him. On his desk was a single document, a purchase agreement. "A private equity firm just bought Apex," he said without turning around. "The deal was done in secret, finalized this morning. I'm out as CEO effective immediately." Sarah picked up the document, scanned it with growing horror. The private equity firm was called Efficiency Capital Partners. 3 guesses who their special advisory consultant was. Marcus, she asked, though she already knew. He couldn't buy a company directly, so he convinced someone else to buy it for him. He's not on paper anywhere, but he'll be running the transformation. Richard finally turned to face her. "Sarah, you need to run. Take your team and get out before..." The door opened. Marcus Thorne walked in, looking exactly as he had that first day, except now his smile held the satisfaction of a predator who'd played the long game and won. "Sarah," he said warmly, as if they were old friends, "I told you this wasn't over.